Okay. How many of you have drunk alcohol? Make noise, because I can't see you. All right, how many of you drank a lot of alcohol in one night? How many of you are really drunk right now? Not enough of you. Okay, fine. How many of you have had a hangover? Me too. How many of you have never had a hangover? Fuck you. Get out of here. For those of you that have had a hangover, some of these things might be familiar. Unconsciousness followed by bad consciousness. Yeah, the poultry, not so familiar. Inability to move, motor dysfunction, blurred vision, feelings of guilt, shame, general disorientation. You know how it is. The one person who hasn't had a hangover, probably don't start drinking. So my name is Paula Croxson, and I am very well qualified to speak on this topic because I am the owner of the worst hangovers in the world. Thank you. They're so bad that my friends named them after me. They call them the Croxson Special. At this point, it's sort of semi-famous. If you've ever met me, you'll have heard of the Croxson Special. And this problem, the reason that my hangovers are so bad, we'll get into, but like the fact that my hangovers are so bad has led me on a very scholarly, peer-reviewed, lifelong journey to try and cure them. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So let's start with the basics. What is a hangover? Otherwise known as visalgia, a hangover is the unpleasant state following an evening of excessive alcohol consumption. Sure, you knew that. And it's very understudied because scientists have a consensus that it's largely our own fault. But it is a problem. It leads to a loss of 0.6 to 0.7 working days per year on average. I think this was maybe a pre-pandemic number. I don't know. Seems a little low to me. And also, it leads to a risk of developing alcohol use disorder. And so there is some basis for some research on it. And so there has been a little bit of research done, but it is a little bit few and far between. So I'm going to share with you what I found when I was dredging the literature and really finding out what does science say about the hangover. And the first thing I found is that they really like to measure things, scientists. I don't know if you've noticed this. They love to measure stuff, and they love to develop scales. And one of the scales they developed was called the acute hangover scale, but they did this in a very methodical way. So they took two different groups of people, a group of maritime students, like mariners, I guess, from an academy in Sweden, and they also took a group of students in the USA. Very balanced study. And they asked them, what comes to mind when you think of a hangover? How would you describe your hangover? And then they quantified it in order of how frequently people said these words. And so the number one symptom of hangover is the feeling of having a hangover. Thank you so much, mariners and students, for your insights. But then it's followed by thirst, headaches, tiredness. What else have we got here? Dizziness or faintness, loss of appetite, stomachache, nausea, racing heart. I decided, the scientist that I am, that I would develop my own hangover scale. And because you're allowed to do this in science, I named it after myself. Thank you. Don't clap yet. This is my hangover scale. This is what the most common symptoms of my hangovers are. All day, every 20 minutes, from when I wake up until I pass out from exhaustion. This is what my hangovers look like. They're not like your normal hangovers, folks. They're not. They're pretty bad. Some may say it's poisoning, but I say they're hangovers and therefore they can be cured. Is there a cure for the hangover? I searched the literature. I asked everybody that I knew, and I did find one cure for the hangover. That cure is not drinking at all. And we're not going to consider that. That's ridiculous. And it's going to put bars out of business. So let's not talk about that. So there is no cure. What about a treatment? And thank goodness, students to the rescue once again. I found a study that they had done in students in the Netherlands where they asked them about the most effective hangover cures in their opinion. Very scientific. And what they found was that all of those cures that are marketed to you and are going to be marketed to you tomorrow, if you have your phone on you and you're listening to this, they're really the least effective things of all. The most effective things are just the stuff that you can find around. It's drinking water, having a good old sleep, eating a nice greasy breakfast, taking some over-the-counter medication. But as I was looking at this very scholarly scale, one thing stuck out to me a little bit. Alcohol. Is there any truth in this? We've all heard of the hair of the dog that bit you, but it feels a little bit like hearsay. But I looked into this a little bit further, and it turns out there's actually a lot of scientific truth to this. And the reason for this is not great. So when people are brought into hospital with alcohol poisoning, when they've had so much alcohol that it's essentially interrupting all of their other bodily functions, there's some shared processes in the breakdown process of alcohol with other processes that leads to a buildup of methanol in the system. Methanol is incredibly toxic. You really don't want it building up in your system. So if people are brought into hospital with alcohol poisoning, sometimes they are treated with ethanol, which is alcohol, so because it binds to the methanol and activates it and makes it less toxic. This is the only scientifically proven hangover treatment that I could find. However, I really should qualify this. If you use this as a form of treating your hangover, you're more likely to drink a great deal more in general, and your risk of having a sort of alcohol use disorder developing is also higher, so please don't do that. Please don't treat your hangover with alcohol. I do not endorse that. So what about prevention? Maybe there's a way to prevent a hangover. So I started to look into all of the things that cause hangovers to see if, therefore, I could come up with a way of kind of, I don't know, like gaming the system. You know, can I still drink really heavily and get away with it? And the first thing that I found was to do with so I was really looking into this idea that maybe we just get really dehydrated when we drink alcohol, and if we just drink a lot of water, then that will be fine. And I've tried to impose this on my friends. I'll go up to them, give them a glass of water, and they'll be like, "What is this? I'm not drinking this. It's ridiculous." So clearly we need science to back it up. And there is some science to back up the fact that you do get pretty dehydrated when you drink alcohol. Vasopressin, which is a chemical produced by your kidneys that helps you to retain water. When you drink alcohol, vasopressin levels go down, which causes you to, you know, you've heard of breaking the seal, right? Oh, sorry. That was supposed to get a longer laugh. There we go. So if you break the seal, you have to pee more. There's a reason for that. There's a scientific reason for that. Unfortunately, drinking more water doesn't prevent your hangover, because those headaches that people are reporting in those hangover scales are not caused by dehydration. They're caused by one of the breakdown products of alcohol. And so it doesn't matter how much water you drink, you're still going to get that headache. So please do drink water, just generally in life. Some might say you should drink it instead of drinking alcohol, but no. Um, so another problem that happens when you have a hangover, to some people, at least to me, is problems with motor control. I don't know if anyone else gets the shaky legs or that kind of thing. You don't have to answer me. So some scientists thought that maybe there was something to the motor control theory, and that maybe there would be something they could do about that. And so they turned to studies in mice who are well known for getting shit-faced. Disgraceful. Disgraceful. So they got a bunch of mice really shit-faced, took them out, showed them a good time, and waited for them to sober up the next day. Made sure they were really hungover, not still drunk, no hair of the dog for them. And then they tested their motor function using the cutest experiment of all. They had them run on these little transparent treadmills. I know. And they were able to map out the patterns that their feet made. And so on the top here, I'm going to show you a control mouse that did not go on a bender. And then on the bottom, I'm going to show you... I mean, I don't think I need to show you a graph, really. You can see the problem here. Now, a little bit of good news. When they gave the mice access to more water, it actually helped a little bit with this. So if you do get the shaky legs, the drinking water does something for you. So what about another potential cause of hangovers, which is the impurities in your alcohol? That's right, folks. It's not the alcohol. It's the impurities. And it turns out there's a scale for that too, because scientists love scales. And this one is the congener scale. So a congener is another thing that's in your alcoholic beverage that isn't the alcohol. You might think of it as an impurity. Often it's a thing that gives your alcohol its flavor. And so they developed a scale which suggested, this was a hypothesis that they put forward, that hangover severity increases the more congeners there are in your beverage. And here's the scale that they came up with. So you can see the like sort of dark-colored, what people I know would call like the brown drinks are at the top here, the red drinks, and then the lower down that you get these kind of like clearer drinks. And at the bottom you get the scientists' favorite, the one they use in all the studies, the ethanol and orange juice. Delicious. So I decided, you'll be shocked to know, to develop my own scale to compare to this one scientifically, obviously, and I called it the Croxson Special Scale. And I ranked all of the beverages that I have drunk over my reasonably long lifetime to see how they measured up. And so, as you can see, red wine is also at the top. It's not good for me. Please don't buy me a red wine. Whiskey, great, absolutely great, lovely drink for me. Champagne, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's nice. Can't always afford it, but nice. And then we got white wine. Lovely. Yeah, not so bad. Vodka-based drinks, also pretty good. Then we've got beer. Beer is less good for me. Beer. Less good at the time, less good the next day. Gin and tonic, very hard to measure just because of the sheer quantity consumed. You know, very difficult to calibrate that measurement, but pretty bad. I would say pretty bad. Whatever the fuck that is. That had to be documented thrice. And as you can see, the congener scale is not at all scientifically accurate when it comes to the Croxson Special. This is problematic in so many ways. What about a buildup of toxins? So some people have said that alcohol is a bit toxic. In fact, I said it myself earlier when I was talking about methanol. So what about that? Well, to understand toxicity in alcohol, let's take a quick look at the way it's broken down. So you start with your alcohol, your ethanol and orange juice, if you will, and it gets broken down using an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase into several byproducts, the main one of which is acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is bad. It's pretty toxic. It's carcinogenic. You don't want it hanging around. You want to go through the second step, which involves aldehyde dehydrogenase, to break down into other byproducts such as acetate that are a little bit more benign. And what sometimes happens is that in some individuals, they lack this aldehyde dehydrogenase. Anybody in this room know anybody who goes red when they drink? Yeah, I'm sorry. If you go red when you drink, it sucks. It really sucks. It's because you don't have very much of this enzyme, or you can't make at all this enzyme aldehyde dehydrogenase. And that leads to a buildup of acetaldehyde, which we don't really want. And that, it gets bigger. And that ends up in this thing called alcohol flush reaction, which is essentially, like, it's really nasty. It's uncomfortable. You get red and puffy. You get itchy. You get uncomfortable. And you have an aversion to having a photo taken. And it turns out that this is a histamine reaction. So it's caused by histamine, which increases all of these things that I just said. One day, when I was very, very hungover, in the depths of my desperation, I took one of my seasickness tablets. And it kind of worked. And afterwards, I looked up what was in it. And it turned out that it does have an antihistamine in it. And I was like, maybe I'm having the alcohol flush reaction. But no, because I don't go red when I've been drinking, so it can't quite be that. But then I discovered that aldehyde dehydrogenase needs another thing to make it work. It needs a thing called a cofactor. A cofactor called glutathione. Sometimes it's called the G stuff because that's way easier to say. And it turns out that if you drink incredibly heavily over an extended period of time, let's just say, God, were those all really in the same night? Anyway, if you do that, then you deplete your stores of glutathione. It kind of goes down over time, and that leads to an inability for your aldehyde dehydrogenase to work, and that leads to a buildup of acetaldehyde. It's going to get big again. And then that leads to the Croxson flush reaction. Thank you. So, great news. Now here comes a really exciting part. It turns out that in order for glutathione to work, you need a precursor to make more of it. You need something that you can turn into glutathione, and it turns out you can buy that stuff for like $20 for 200 capsules as a liver supplement. It's called N-acetylcysteine. It is, or NAC, and it is fantastic. I bought some. I tried it. It works. I told all my friends about it. And there's even a clinical trial. Sorry, Matt. I was going to wrap up. It did give me still a headache because it turns out that acetate is the reason that you get the headache. But real quick, just to wrap up, there was one clinical trial that was done with NAC. I was so excited when I saw this, but unfortunately, it was stopped because it wasn't very effective. The reason it wasn't very effective was because A, it didn't work, and B, it has some nasty gastrointestinal side effects in people. But I do want to say this. They were measuring people, of course, on a scale. And the scale was from 0 to 52. And the people in this clinical trial had a hangover of around 13. I mean, that's just a morning for me. It's not even a hangover. So I still have hope for NIC. Some of my friends are very mad at me because it didn't work for them. But nonetheless, I do think there's still hope for the cure for the Croxson special. And I hope that you will join me on that journey. Thank you.
Go to nerdnite.com to find a Nerd Night event near you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for our latest presentation.